Last Sunday, the New York Times came out with a special section on mental health and mental wellness. Maybe you saw it. And embedded within the section was a story about the negative impacts of social media. Now, I wasn't astonished by the alarming anecdotes shared by author Stephanie Vance, because I think at this point we all know the negative impacts of social media and mental health. But I was surprised by her following questions. She writes, "What if we spent more time creating for no one?" Social media provides a platform to engage in an act of creation and activity. Creativity is well known to have such healing benefits as improving mood, reducing stress, anxiety, and boosting self-esteem. But she continues, when we focus our creative energy on a system that attacks the very things that creativity fosters, then we are left with acts of creativity that make us sick. Removing the performance of it all, and then engaging in the writing, the making of videos, drawing, the use of any other creative tool, if we choose to do that for ourselves, that just may be the antidote to the destructive qualities of social media usage. In other words, we have to ask ourselves the question, what's the purpose of creativity? Because I do think that elements of performance are vital. Whether we perform on a stage or we dance in front of an audience or we sing a masterpiece, whether we present a beautiful sculpture or introduce a new book or an idea, it's often the performance that allows our stories to be shared, our stories to be told. But when we become too focused on what other people think, when we create for the sole purpose is to see how someone else will react, then I think we've forgotten that creativity is just as much about revealing our souls for the purpose of growing our souls. It's often our poetry, our art, our baking, our writing, our singing, our dancing, inventing, our learning, our questioning that reminds us that our own creation, it's far from complete. But when we create for the purpose of pleasing others, I think that's when we stifle our spiritual trajectory. There was an online blogger that shares the following confession. She said, "My outsides and my insides, they don't always match. They don't match for the online world. They don't match for the people that I see every day. Because sometimes putting on a brave face when you're hurting is part of being an adult. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I miss me." Rabbis Michelle Perlman and Sharon Mars explain that this idea of performing for others and forgetting who we are in the process and realizing that we have the chance to create in order to figure out who we may become, that starts right at the beginning. That starts right in what we read this morning in the Garden of Eden. Because they explain that the real sin, the real mistake that Adam and Eve made, it wasn't necessarily just eating the forbidden fruit. But the mistake is made when God calls out to Adam and says, "Ayeka, where are you?" And Adam's response is the following: "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid. And so I hid myself." Why were Adam and Eve forced out of the garden? Because God faced human beings that were already running from themselves. Faced human beings who were running from their truth, ashamed, afraid, forgetting the fact that falling often leads to getting up, and getting up, that often leads to reaching higher. But just as God took a step back from creating, God was engaged in what we call tzimtzum. The Kabbalists coined that term, contracting oneself. We too can determine that we should take a step back, realize how much hiding we have done in our lifetime, and then determine what kind of creativity am I meant to offer this world. Ayeka, where are you? Who are you? Does the world only see one person when we know deep down inside, you know what? I'm actually someone entirely different. The Talmud reminds us that any Torah scholar whose insides do not match their outsides, well, that person is not a true scholar of Torah. The wisest person is someone who doesn't hide and instead knows that there's more growing to do when we're willing to reveal ourselves. Someone who doesn't run, but like God, takes a deep breath and continues creating and building and dreaming. Even if no one is watching, even if everyone is watching, because the art of creativity is the art of sustaining one's soul. The Hasidic master, the Kedushat Levi, teaches us that the word Breshit can be broken up into two words. It can be read as Beit Reshit, two beginnings. He explains that God bestows life upon each one of us, if you will, that's the initial creation, but then it's upon us to take our lives in our hands and determine, what will this life look like? How will I shape and mold and form this precious gift? And that's what the Kedushat Levi means by a second creation. That there are wondrous blessings that are meant to pour forth from each one of us, from those first sparks of creation. But when we hide from ourselves, when we create solely for others and not for the whispers of our heart, we suppress those sparks and we never allow God's light to shine forth through this world. But when we do decide to become active partners in the ongoing creation of this world, in the ongoing creation of ourselves, then that's just perhaps the moment in which God is revealed in each and every one of us. I think that's the moment where heaven and earth have a chance to meet. Shabbat Shalom.